Madhir the Proud, also known as the Prince of the Tuatha De Danann, had business to settle with Yoki Aram, the High King of Ireland. For the king had given the prince 3 tasks. 1, to clear the land of stones and with them make a causeway toward the bog of Tethfa. 2, to make fertile rushy ground around his fort. And 3, to clothe the bare hill of the district with trees all over. Madhir agreed to do this since he lost the 3rd game of chess. However, there was one condition, that neither King Yoki nor any members of his household will look over the terraces as he was completing his work. So that night, as Madhir led several men to help him complete his task, he looked in the distance, and what did he see? A very suspicious on-looking steward, from none other than the household of King Yoki. Understandably upset, Madhir marched into the house of King Yoki and declared, "High King of Ireland, you have done me wrong. I have been nothing but loyal to you, and you betray me." King Yoki stood back and said, "Yes, I messed up, but I would like to continue with no more hostility. How do you propose we settle this?" "You know what we have to do," Madhir said. "We must play another game of chess, but this time, whoever wins gets to choose their reward." Now, King Yoki had nearly been tired of all of the chess playing, but his confidence was still rather high. I mean, he had won the last 3 times. What could go wrong here? But it would seem, to his surprise, that Madhir had won this round. "You are victorious," King Yoki said. "Tell me, what is it that you desire?" Madhir stood tall and proud, with his feet on the ground and his chest held high. "To take your wife Attain into my arms and to give her a kiss." King Yoki stood back in shock, for he was astounded and, more importantly, offended by what he had just heard. I mean, how dare this man come into his kingdom and demand something foolish like that? So he had a plan for him. "It is as you wish, but if you would like to receive your reward, you must come back into my soil in a matter of 1 month. Madhir agreed, and he left the land ecstatic, for he was finally going to be reunited with his long-lost love, Attain. A month had passed, and Madhir was due to return. Before he arrived, King Yoki set up an army around his fort, so that way there would be no intruders. He would have the beautiful Attain right in the middle for Madhir to take the bait, and they would go in for the attack. But Madhir, being as smart as he was, hid in the midst of the woods, and as he looked past the guards, he finally saw her. The beautiful Attain, her long, beautiful hair, her pure, soft skin, her eyes glistening in the sun. She was as beautiful as he remembered her. To think If only she could return the favor. If only she could remember the bond that they shared. If only she could remember the love. Madhir couldn't wait any longer, and with his magic, he made it pass through all of the guards and met before Attain. And with his might, he flung open his arms and embraced Attain with a kiss. Now Attain had initially been startled by the strange man kissing her, but soon enough, everything began to sink in. She remembered the love that she shared with Madhir. She remembered her life as an immortal butterfly. She remembered the storm. She remembered everything. She then looked Madhir in the eyes and she said, "Take me home." She then began to shine within the light of the immortals, and before everyone's eyes, Madhir lifted them into the sky. For he and Attain were reunited once again.
The Dagda had many wonderful possessions. His cauldron of plenty, which never ran empty. His mighty club, which he could use to smite or bring a man back to life. But his most special of all was his harp, or ethna, called the Fourangled music. This harp was carved out of the first oak and inlaid with the most precious of jewels. And with this harp, that only the Dagda could play, he could make a man or an angel laugh and dance, or he could make them cry. Well, one day during the second battle of Moitora, the two Adidana were battling the Fomorians, and the Doctor was battling along with them, when all of a sudden in the distance, the Fomorian army heard the sound of the harp. And the Fomor chief knew he must have it. He called a few of his men, saying, "Who will go with me to get this harp?" For he knew it must be special indeed. Well, they finally followed it along and found where it was in the Dagda's house, which was unwatched. They snuck into his house and they grabbed the harp and they ran out as fast as they could and as far as they could, taking their wives and their children with them. And they hid in the cave and knew that they had stolen something very grand indeed. Well, a few days later, the remainder of the Fomorian army did return to the cave, defeated. But the Fomorian army took great pleasure in knowing that they may have lost the battle of Moitora, but they had the Dagda's most precious gift of all, his harp. The two Adidana went home, celebrating their victory, ready to eat, feast, play music, and dance. "Break out the music," they called. "Come, let us dance." But there was no music. There was no music. The Dagda realized his harp was gone. Someone had stolen it. "Who will come with me to get my harp back? Tired as you may be, it is the most important relic I have. We must get it." And a few of them decided to go. And so, the Dagda, taking a few of his men, traveled far and wide looking for it, and they finally stumbled across the Fomorian army's camp. They were asleep in the cave. And as the Dagda and his men approached, they were fearful. For how were they going to get past all of these men? The Dagda called out to his harp, "My Fourangled music, if you can hear me, come back to me." And sure enough, the harp flew over the Fomorians and back into the Dagda's arms. But the Fomorians began to charge, running furiously, taking up their axes and their spears, ready to kill. "I think you'd better play your harp," said one of the Doctor's men. The Doctor took his harp, and he played a tune so jolly and so cheerful that it made the Fomorians drop their spears and axes and start dancing and laughing. They were laughing so hard they couldn't even stand, let alone charge. But then the music stopped, and the Fomorians began to charge again, running furiously. "I think you'd better play your music," said another one of the Doctor's men. And the Doctor took his harp, and this time he played a song so melancholy that the Fomorians began to cry. They sat down, covered their faces, rocked back and forth. The strongest of men couldn't show their eyes, for so many tears were falling from them. And then the music stopped, and they were furious. They took up their axe and spears, and with bloodthirst in their eyes, began to charge. "And now, one more song," said the Doctor. And he played a song on his harp so soft, like a whisper, that all of the Fomorians began to fall asleep. And from that day forward, no man nor angel ever stole the Doctor's harp again.
Dips the rocky highland, oh, Sleuthwood in the lake. There lies a leafy island where flapping herons wake. The drowsy river rats, there we hide our fairy vats, full of berries and of reddest stolen cherries. Human child, to the waters of the wild, with a fairy, hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the waves of moonlight glosses, the dim grey sands with light, far off by furthest rosses, we are footed all the night, weaving olden dances, mingling hands and mingling glances, till the moon has taken flight. To and fro we leap and chase the frothy bubbles, while the world is full of troubles and anxious in its sleep. Come away, oh human child, to the waters of the wild, with a fairy, hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. The wandering water gushes from the hills above and quiet in pools among the rushes that scarce could be the start. We seek for slumbering trout, and whispering in their ears, give them unquiet dreams, leading softly out from the ferns that drop their tears over the young streams. Come away, oh human child, to the he's going, the solemn eye. He'll hear no more the lowing of the calves on the warm hillside, or the kettle on the hearth sing peace into his breast, or see the brown mice bounding round the oatmeal chest. For he comes, the human child, to the waters of the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than he can understand.
Liban, the Mermaid Saint. The demise of Yochnid began when he fell in love with his stepmother. And feeling the wrath of his father, he, his lover, his brother, and other followers, they fled north. And while they were fleeing, they took rest next to the river Boyne. Here they met the god of love, Angus. But Angus was angry, for he despised the way that the two lovers represented themselves. And in his anger, he slaughtered all of their horses, but gave them one to use. He told them to take this horse, to use it until their next stop, and then set it free. So the couple took the horse, and they used it, and they stopped, but they kept it. And they kept going, until finally they came to the place where they thought they could settle down. And people began to unpack and to rest. And the horse they were supposed to take back to Angus, it settled and rested. And it urinated upon the ground. And in that spot a magic well was formed. And this well had an endless supply of water. And it would flow and flow, but a capstone was placed on top of it in order to not allow it to flood the land. And this is where they stayed for years, until one day, when a woman decided to use the well. She took the capstone back off of it, used it, but forgot to put it back. So the water began to flow and flow and flow and flow until it became so powerful that nobody could get close enough to it to shut it off. And the lands began to flood. Houses began to flood. Everyone in the village died that day. Yochnid, his lover, his brother, and all of their followers except for one. Liban, Yochnid's daughter. Liban and her dog companion had took refuge in an underwater cave, but now because of the flood, they were trapped. They stayed down there for a year, and every day Liban pleaded with the gods to save her and to help her. And finally, they answered her prayer. They gave her the lower half of a body of a salmon, and her dog an otter, for they must never be apart. For 300 years, Liban roamed the seas. And now in Ireland, St. Congal had just sent Beowen to Rome to learn order and rule. And while Beowen and his mates were on their ship, they heard the sound of angels. "Who sings that?" asked Beowen. "It is I," says Liban as she pierced her head at the water. "Who are you?" asked Beowen. "I am Liban, daughter of Yochnid, and I have roamed these seas for 300 years, and I come to tell you this. In a year's time, you are to take me westward, and I am trusting you and everyone that you tell about me to do this.
And so a year goes by, and the nets are cast exactly in the same spot where Beowen had been a year ago. And they wait, and they wait, till finally Fergus of Malik's net begins to pull, and he pulls up the most beautiful creature he has ever seen. And they take Liban to sea, and they take Liban to land, where they place her in a vessel. And her description is marvelous, wonderful. Numbers from all around come to look at her, and among these are the chief. And when he enters the hall, upon his back he is wearing a crimson mantle. And Liban sees this crimson mantle, and she can't help but to stare at it as it makes its way closer to her. And finally it says, "If it is my mantle you want, you can have it." "Oh no, that is not the reason I stare," she says. "It is because on the day he died, a crimson mantle is what Yochnid wore. Nevertheless, for your kind gesture, I grant that you and your successors will never forget from whence they came." Then, out from behind the chief, a great warrior, infamous for his lack of respect and refinement, came, reached in the vessel Liban was in, grabbed her companion, and slaughtered it in front of everyone. Liban, seeing this, "I bestow upon you that you and your successors will never win a fight until you and they fast at my shrine." Then another fight broke out, but this time it was about who had the right to own Liban. St. Comgall thought it was he because it was in his waters she was found. Fergus believes it's he because it was in his net in which she was caught. Beowen thinks it's he because it was his promise that he made to her to come back and get her. And because the men couldn't come up with a solution on their own, they left it up to the gods, and they fasted and they waited. Finally, an angel came to them and said that the next day 2 stags were to come and to take Liban to where she needs to be, and they must not interfere. The next day came. The 2 stags took Liban to the church, where a clergy was there waiting for her. The clergyman said to her that she had 2 choices. She could either be baptized immediately, or she must spend another 300 years roaming the seas, thus prolonging her baptism and her entrance into heaven. But the decision was made quickly. Liban decided to be baptized right then and there. And so St. Comgall came and he baptized her. And when he raised her up, gave her the new name of Mergen, or sea birth. Thus, Liban sits among the holy virgins, where she is adorned like God had intended for her in heaven.